My name's Cassius. If you missed the initial introduction, I'm going to be co-hosting our discussion today with my colleague Shaz Akhtar from Near Neighbours. I'm very relieved and particularly pleased to be able to hand over to our Chief Officer at this point, Adam Edwards.
Good morning all. Thank you very much for joining us all for this kind of really important talk in our series on faith and finance. Last Thursday was World Earth Day, and I heard on the news that 2020 was the warmest year on record in Europe, with temperatures 3.4 degrees above the average. And this follows a worrying trend, because I believe that the previous 6 years have also been the warmest on record. This wasn't just a one-off event. Climate is changing, and that's having a damaging effect on our planet and its inhabitants. The changes in temperature are affecting discharges from rivers, affecting soil moisture and vegetation growth. We've seen in this country, even in the West Midlands, that flooding is increasing and affecting our homes and the places that we live. And I was reading that even in the Arctic Siberia, there were wildfires happening last year. Also, last year was the highest level for 18 years of greenhouse gases. And so it feels a very opportune time that we're having this conversation and seeing what we can do as people of faith about these issues. This time last year we were in full lockdown, and the roads were empty, and on the news we saw lots of images of places, cities around the world that are normally encrusted in smog, slowly being less polluted with clearer air. And we talk very much about a different world and how we would reset our habits to try and help our planet and to try and stem the flow of climate change. I had to go to a meeting last week, my sort of first one since I took up this role, and I was astonished by how busy the roads were. For a 35-minute journey from Sandwell back over to Wolverhampton, it took me over an hour and a half. And I kind of reflected on the fact of actually how much of those kind of promises last year about a different world are we actually trying to live out now as we go back to our normal lives. And so it feels a really opportune time that we're able to have this discussion and ask these questions. Each major faith has different approaches and teachings on climate change, and it's really exciting that we'll be looking at some of those today. It's also a chance for us not only just to have a conversation today, but to continue that conversation about how we can work together in our communities to look after our planet in a better way, as well as what we can do together as communities. It'll also be interesting to look at what we can do as individual people of faith to make a difference in our own lives. Perhaps looking at green energy providers that use renewable and sustainable forms of energy, asking questions of our energy providers about how they can do things in a better way. Perhaps looking at reducing our own carbon footprint and looking at the differences we can make in that, and making conscious decisions in our everyday life that will make a change, and then encouraging others to do the same. So it's a really exciting start today, and I hope there'll be lots of conversations that stem off from today. So I'm really looking forward to hearing our speakers today. Back over to you, Cassius.
Bless you. Thanks, Adam. And you have really just helped us to think about the wider issues of concern around climate change, but also the reality of what we're trying to do with this event is also to help us to to reflect on perhaps some of the individual issues, issues around, warmer homes for those who are struggling to heat their homes during this current time. And that's of particular interest to me in the work that I do as the Just Finance development worker with transforming communities together. But also hearing from different faith perspectives about some of the wider issues today is going to be really important to us. And so I just want to hand over to my colleague Shaz. Shaz is our Near Neighbours worker, and she is going to be playing the role of introducing each of our speakers for the session for today. So hi Shaz, thanks for all of the work that you've done in pulling this event together.
No problem, Cassius. Thank you very much. I have to say, great opening from Adam there. And again, some of the things we can do to improve our own carbon imprint. So thank you very much for that, Adam. Now, before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to remind those who have just joined us in the last few minutes that this event is being recorded and will be used on our social media platforms, both Transforming Communities Together and Near Neighbours as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is representing the Christian faith. He has degrees in physics and theology and wrote his master's dissertation in nature contemplation. He is a rector of 2 parishes on the edge of the Black Country, Reverend Rich Clarkson, the environmental officer for the Lichfield Diocese. Please give us a reflection on faith, finance and climate change.
Thank you very much. Really good to be with you all today. And thank you for asking me to come and speak a little bit about what the Christian faith has to say about environment and finance and those sorts of things. Rosie and I are going to share the sort of Christian faith perspective section. So I'm going to talk a bit more about what the Christian faith has to say about the environment, and then I'll hand over to Rosie, who'll talk a bit more about the sort of finance side of things. But the Christian understanding of the environment comes from the Bible, and it can be really summed up like this. God made the world and it was good. God has given humans a particular role in looking after the goodness of the world, and we're accountable to God for the ways in which we exercise that responsibility. That sort of sums up the Christian approach. So first of all, God made the world and it was good. There's a verse in the Psalms, the hymn book of the Bible, which says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it." And that really encompasses what we believe about the earth, that God made everything and it belongs to God. It doesn't belong to us, it belongs to God. And in the New Testament, Paul, one of the early Christian leaders, writes that in Jesus all things were made and in him all things are held together. And the story at the very beginning of the Bible talks about how God created the land and the sea and the stars and the moon and animals and plants and everything. And when each time God creates something, he looks at it and says, "This is good." And then at the end, when he's finished creating, he takes a step back, has a rest and says, "It is very good." So God made the world and it is good. But God gives humans a particular responsibility to care for this creation. And this is where it gets tricky, because there's a verse in Genesis that says that humans are to fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And in the last few hundred years, particularly in the West, that word dominion has been sort of taken to mean domination. And so humans have seen the earth as something that we can use and abuse for our own gain, often our own financial gain. And we've not seen it as something to care for. But actually more recently, we've been rediscovering that call to be stewards, to be trustees, caretakers, gardeners of the goodness of creation. So we have a particular responsibility to look after this world. And finally, we are accountable for the ways that we exercise that responsibility. And as we look around the world, we see climate change, biodiversity loss, plastic pollution, all of these issues that we're increasingly aware of, as well as issues around justice and poverty and inequality, which all stem from that broken relationship between humans and the earth. And so we need to rediscover that vocation as stewards, as caretakers of God's creation. And how we rediscover that is both in how we think about our relationship with the world, but also in what we do with our time, with our money, with the resources that we have. The prophet Isaiah writes that the earth lies polluted under its inhabitants, and I don't think that's ever been more true than it is at the moment. And the book of Revelation, which is the last book in the Bible, which offers a vision of hope for the future of the planet, but it also has a stark warning that the time is coming for destroying those who would destroy the earth. So some challenging words there. So to sort of sum up a very whistle-stop tour of what Christians believe about the environment and our place in it. God made the world and it is inherently good. And God has given us a responsibility to care for the world, and particularly to care for the goodness of the world. And we've not done a very good job of that, particularly over the last century or so, but we can do better. And at the heart of the Christian faith is the idea that we can change, even when we've made mistakes. We can change, whether that's us as individuals, as communities, as a society, as a planet. So that's my sort of brief reflection on the Christian understanding of faith and climate change and the environment. And I think Rosie's going to share a little bit more about that, but I'll hand back to Shaz to introduce Rosie.
Thank you, Reverend Rich. I really like how you summed that up. We can change as individuals, as society, and as a planet. So thank you very much for that. And yes, our second speaker is Rosie Wenner, who has worked for Christian Aid as a community fundraiser. Currently is managing Money Makes Change program, which helps Christians connect their faith and finance for a fairer, more sustainable world. So, and she is today representing the Ethical Council for Corporate Responsibility. So Rosie, over to you.
Thanks very much, Shaz. It's really lovely to be with you all. So as Christians, if we take seriously that belief that the whole earth belongs to God, as Reverend Rich has described, then we have to take a really close look at our individual use of money and our church finances. What does it look like in practice to walk faithfully and to tread lightly on the earth with our financial decisions? And how does that connect with the needs of the local communities that we're serving and our brothers and sisters around the world? So I'm just going to suggest this morning 3 things that we can do. Firstly, to think green with our spending, then to think climate friendly with our banking, and then lastly, to think big with our campaigning. So let's look briefly at spending first. How can we think green with the money that our churches spend? We might not want to think of churches as consumers, but we actually make decisions all the time about what we buy, whether that's food, cleaning products, kitchen appliances, or choosing a new energy supplier. So those very practical decisions. And I spoke to a church recently that had created a really comprehensive environmental policy around the goods and services that they buy. And I was inspired by another church that had been helping members of the local community switch to green energy suppliers, particularly those that don't have online access, in order to compare different tariffs. And that led to the creation of the brilliant Fair Energy campaign, which many of you hopefully have seen, and I'll put a link to that in the chat later. So thousands of churches have switched to greener energy suppliers in recent years as part of the Big Church Switch initiative, and that's shifted an estimated £5 million away from fossil fuels and into renewables. So when you're part of that bigger movement, there's real change can happen. Many churches from different denominations also take part in the Eco Church scheme, and part of that encourages a really close look at what we buy and sometimes limiting what we buy in order to reduce our carbon emissions. So that's a little bit about our spending. What about our banking? How can we choose climate-friendly banking? As you'll probably be aware, many of our big high street banks are heavily involved in financing the fossil fuel industry, and they're not moving fast enough towards net zero. So a question for us to ask as churches, as faith communities, if we bank with those banks, are we comfortable with that? Is that something that we are happy to be aligned with? The good news is that there are more and more ethical banking options available for individuals and for churches. And as part of the work that I'm doing with Money Makes Change programme, we've done an analysis of the more ethical bank accounts that are suitable for churches. And many of those banks have strict environmental policies around what they will and won't finance. So that's good news. It's also worth saying that credit unions that are owned by members and only lend to members are unlikely to have those links with the fossil fuel industry that our big high street banks do. So credit unions are not only a really good option in terms of financial resilience for our local communities, but they can be an ethical environmental option too. And I think our churches can play a really key role in encouraging individuals to consider ethical banking and to see that as part of their discipleship and stewardship and care for creation. I think we definitely need more preaching and teaching about money and ethics and how to apply that in our day-to-day lives. And the final thing I want to say is to think big with our campaigning. So our individual actions as Christians and as churches with our finances, that's really important, to take individual action in terms of living with integrity and modelling a different way of living. But to really bridge that gap between the world as it is and the world as it should be, I think that requires us to do more than individual action. It requires us to speak out, it requires us to campaign and to be part of a wider movement. We need to put pressure on companies to address carbon emissions and wider environmental issues, and to start moving towards a circular economy where the Earth's resources are used in a sustainable way. And we can do that in a number of ways, as individuals and as churches and as faith groups, as shareholders, as consumers, as customers, but also through campaigning for policy change and for regulations around issues like plastic packaging, for example, which is something that many people in our communities might be concerned about. As active citizens, we can also push for big changes in the financial sector, for example, where pension money is invested. So some of you may be aware that local government pension funds have lots of investments in fossil fuels, including in BP and Shell. So there's over £10 billion worth of investments from local pension funds in the last financial year in fossil fuels. And I wonder whether members of our churches who work for local government are aware of how their pension money is being invested. So there are campaigns you can get involved with if that's something that you'd like to take action on. So those are just 3 areas that I think that are related to climate and finance that we can take action in: our spending, our banking and our campaigning. And we do all of this because of our love for God, for God's creation, and out of a concern for justice, because climate change is already impacting on the poorest in our world and those who've done least to cause it.
Thank you, Rosie. A great Christian perspective there from both you and Reverend Rich on how, I think we'll all be taking away from what you've just said, Rosie, is how our financial decisions can make an impact, and most certainly change can take place with taking into account what we are buying. So thank you for that contribution. Now our third speaker is representing the faith Islam. He has served as an external examiner at the University of Wales, Trinity St David, Hertfordshire University and Staffordshire University. He was a senior lecturer in information management at the University of Wolverhampton Business School for 20 years. Dr. Zahid Parvez, the rector of Markfield Institute of Higher Education and the head of quality and regularity compliance. Over to you, Dr. Zahid. Dr. Zahid, are you muted? You're muted, Dr. Zahid.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes, yeah, please continue. Yeah, yes, no, it's okay.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most merciful, the gracious. What I would like to share is from the Islamic perspective, a few concepts. As has been said, that climate change and its adverse effects, they are a fact of life. And if we don't do anything about these things, we will all suffer. So we are witnessing so many issues: rising sea levels, the changes in weather patterns, rapid loss of many species, loss of biodiversity, erosion of the soil, global warming, and so on and so forth. So it's very important that we reflect deeply over the root causes of this crisis if we are to develop a way out of this crisis. Religion, for me, can provide valuable perspectives on the causes of our crisis and also on the possible solutions. So the perspectives from different religions should be part of the discussions to find ways out of our crisis. And I believe that religions can also help in implementing solutions because they shape people's worldviews and the moral attitudes. So as time is short, I will just share with you 4 Islamic concepts that show the normative potential of Islamic guidance to help us in finding a way out of our crises, whether it's economic crisis or environmental crisis. The first concept is Tawheed. In fact, we don't discuss anything in Islam without mentioning the fundamental concept of Tawheed, because that's the root of everything. Tawheed means the unity of God, the oneness of God. So God created the heavens and the earth. So there is unity in the whole universe. There is order in the universe, and there is interconnectedness in the whole universe. And that brings mizan, what we call balance, harmony, and justice in the whole universe. So the Quran says that God created the heavens and raised them high, and he set the balance, the mizan, so that we may not exceed the balance. We must conduct our affairs with justice and do not fall short in the balance. So to address our climate changes and other problems, Islam directs us to see the interconnectedness between our environmental, economic, and social dimensions of our lives. God created the earth and the universe, and he set the balance and the equilibrium in everything. And it is through our human action that we have disturbed this equilibrium, this balance. Human arrogance, short-sightedness, selfishness, and greed, extravagant lifestyles, our overproduction and our overconsumption to maximize profits, exploitation of each other, and the injustices we cause in this process have led to the concentration of wealth in fewer and fewer hands. And this overconsumption has placed a huge burden on the earth's natural resources. And this has disturbed the balance, causing climate changes and many other environmental issues. And the consequent consumer culture which we have created has led to an individualistic society. And hence we witness the erosion of collective life and social capital. And as a result, we see increase in loneliness, boredom, lack of social care for the elderly and the children, rise of mental illnesses, and so on and so forth. So to analyze the causes of our climate change, Islam guides us to see the interconnectedness of the economic, social, and environmental issues. And this will also draw out the role humans play in this crisis. And it says in the Quran that Zahar al-fasadu fil barri wal bahr, corruption has appeared on land and sea by the actions of human beings. So God may let them taste part of the consequences of what they have done. Perhaps they may return to that balance again. So to restore that balance, we need to embed this concept of circularity into whatever we do. So instead of taking, using, disposing, taking, using, and disposing, we need to move away from that linear model to taking, using, and recycling, or regenerating, or repurposing, or optimizing, or sharing the resources in order to reduce the burden on the earth and to maintain that balance. And the Mizan concept therefore welcomes this circular economy concept, and the efforts which are being taken up by many governments and also by many companies and organizations. That is about recycling, exploring renewable energy sources, designing out waste from whatever we do. So this balance, Mizan, can lead to some of these solutions. Now, Mizan in the Quran also is translated as justice as well. So we must ensure social justice and fair distribution of wealth, as these can create social and economic unsustainability. Yeah, so this fair distribution of wealth will lead to social sustainability and economic sustainability. So things like refraining from usury, hoarding, false advertising, and so on, which cause problems, but encouraging charity, helping the poor and the needy, and all those things. So this is a powerful concept which emerged from the concept of Tawheed, justice and Mizan. The second concept in Islam is the concept of Khalifa. Now, as our Christian colleague has said, that God is the Lord and the creator of the heavens and the earth. We are his vicegerents. We are not lords, we are not masters, but we are vicegerents. We have a noble place in the universe. We have been created with dignity, and we are all Khalifas of Allah equally. So this concept of equality is there. And because we don't own the earth, this earth has been given to us. We are the stewards. So we have a duty of care, and we must play a role of stewardship. And stewardship means planning for the efficient use of resources and replenishing them for future generations. Move towards responsible production and consumption, and to reduce waste. So this is an important concept which will make us conscious of our duty of care. So stewardship is about activities focusing on conservation and sustainability. So giving us vicegerency on earth by God means entrusting us with the duty to protect and to restore balance in the environment, and to protect the signs for future generations to enjoy. And the Prophet ﷺ, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, instructed Muslims in different ways about water conservation, avoiding the wasteful consumption of resources. It says, eat and drink, but do not waste, proper land use, stewardship of trees, and compassion for the animals and the birds. And he even designated a special forested park near Medina in his lifetime. So that's the second concept, again, very powerful concept. The third is maslaha, what we translate in English as public obligation for good or public good. So the public good means sustainable achievement of good for all people, welfare of people, advantages and benefit to all creatures. So it's an obligation to preserve the resources and care for future human beings and the creatures. So again, it draws our attention towards social sustainability and the public good. The last concept I want to share with you is akhirah. Is usually translated about accountability on the day of judgment, but akhirah actually means the end results, the impact of our present actions on the future. وَلْتَنْزُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. Let everyone think about what they are sending for tomorrow. So it's a future oriented, to become future oriented. So this changes our thinking from short-term profit maximizing, short-term gains, to considering future consequences of our actions. And like our Christian speaker said, we are accountable on the day of judgment for our actions, and we will be asked how we used our money, our finances, how we made decisions, how we used the resources of the earth, and to what consequences. So these, just 4 examples, I have given you 4 concepts, fundamental concepts, suggest that we develop an economic system which is based on justice, fair distribution of wealth, responsible production and consumption, and this stewardship and duty of care towards the environment and duty of care for the people, to design products and systems based on circularity to help to maintain that balance, that mizan, and to become future-oriented thinking, to have future-oriented thinking as opposed to this short-term thinking. So Islamic values, and I'm sure many other religious people will also present other values. These values can play a very constructive role in our discussions about climate change and other problems we as humans are facing. So I welcome this seminar, and I hope that it helps us to learn from each other and helps us to join hands to address our common problems. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zahid. That was another great contribution and a reminder of our duty of care to this earth. And as you all heard, Dr. Zahid touched on 4 aspects, a lot of food for thought there. So we've heard from our first 3 speakers, and I'm going to hand back over to Cassius before I introduce our last 2 speakers. So Cassius, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Reverend Rich, Rosie, and Dr. Zahid. Those were excellent presentations. I was thinking as I was listening to you that we need a full day at least just to dissect some of these issues. I want to jump into some of the questions firstly, and Steve Dolby typed in the chat about the issue of sustainable heating systems for places of worship, and I just wondered if any of you could respond to that in terms of your experiences and perhaps any of your own thoughts in relation to that, a key issue for our places of worship. Rosie, you also mentioned about the fair climate initiative. It would be helpful just if you could say a little bit more about that as well. But if we address that first question, Rich, did you want to come in there just in relation to sustainable heating systems for our places of worship?
Yeah, just, I mean, there's not an easy answer to the question. It is an issue. I mean, I do a lot of work with churches around our diocese. Often they're sort of medieval buildings and they're not designed to be environmentally sort of efficient and that sort of thing. But it can become almost a sort of red herring in that people get so focused on the heating system, the boiler in a church or in a place of worship, and see that almost as a reason not to do anything else. And as Rosie said, there's so much that we can do, and how we heat our buildings, how we spend our money can be part of that. But I think we can look at where the energy comes from to power those heating systems. But actually, my sort of advice is to not let the challenges of heating an old building become a reason not to do anything about addressing the effect of climate change, because there's an awful lot of things that we can do, and there are some things that are harder to do in the constraints of the places, the buildings that we're responsible for.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, clearly lots more for each of us to do, and perhaps take back to our own faith communities as a result of what we hear and learn today. Rosie, yeah, I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about the Fair Energy campaign. And there's also a comment from Richard Flatley, a good friend from Sandwell Networkers Group, asking about the ethical banks. If you could say a little bit more about perhaps who some of those institutions are.
Yeah, of course. So the Fair Energy campaign set up in partnership with Citizens UK, I think initiated by a local church in London, but now it's become a much bigger campaign. And the idea is that you get together locally to hold a switch day. So you train up volunteers to help people to switch to renewable energy suppliers. And also those energy suppliers are often the ones that are going to give you a fair deal, and maybe on a lower tariff, so particularly for communities that are struggling with fuel poverty. It's a really, really good way that you can take action to support your local community, but also to help more people move to green energy suppliers. So I think, Cassius, you put the link in the chat to the Fair Energy campaign, but I'll just do that again so that people have got it. So yeah, that's really worth looking at. In terms of ethical banking, obviously, it does depend on the ethical issues that you're interested in. It's quite complex, and what one person might consider an ethical bank, another person might not. So if you kind of bear that in mind, I would say that Ethical Consumer is a really good place to look, who have independent research and ratings around. They look at different current accounts and savings accounts on a whole range of different issues, from climate to human rights to tax avoidance, anything like that you might be interested in looking at. Triodos come up almost always at the top of those ratings as a really ethical bank, but you can also look at building societies like Nationwide, and the Cooperative Bank also has ethical policies that you might want to consider. It does depend what you're looking for, and what an individual is looking for might be different from what a church needs in terms of the services that a bank can offer. But I'll try and put a link to our analysis as well, because we looked at some of the bank accounts that would be suitable for churches.
Thanks, Rosie. And yeah, I wanted to raise just a theological question, because I am wearing my collar today, so I feel as if I need to just launch that into the conversation. Dr. Zahid, you raised some really important points for us, just thinking from our faith perspectives, just hearing about the Muslim community, but also reflections I think that we would recognize in our Christian faith, just talking about our joint responsibility, the stewardship, some of that Rich mentioned in his presentation as well. I just wonder what your responses would be to those who are perhaps skeptical from our faith communities, feeling that actually all of this is completely out of our control as human beings, and the way that the earth is going is just how things are supposed to be. Any responses to that from the experiences of your faith, whether that's Dr. Zahid, Rosie, or Rich wanting to comment?
Yeah, if I can say from an Islamic perspective, if we analyze the root cause of our problems as humans, then the root solution lies with the humans as well. So Islam does not suggest that we remain passive or indifferent.
Okay, are we okay to make a start about 12:30? Would that be all right?
Sorry,
okay.
Yeah, apologies.
Yeah,
If you could just check, that you're muted. If you're not one of the speakers, that would be great.
Yeah. Can I carry on? Yeah.
Yes, please.
So Islam does encourage effort, and that we need to organize ourselves. But can I just add to the previous questions, responses which were asked? There is a mosque in Cambridge just built. It's called the Eco Masjid. So efforts are being made, but I would like to take a more holistic approach and prioritize. Like the biggest problem is our overproduction, our consumption, and our economic system. If we address that, we'll address 90% of our problems. So instead of looking at micro level issues, which are important, we need to really start engaging with our governments and United Nations level to look at the macro level causes of our problems. But Islam does not believe that we must remain indifferent. We are able, with the help of God, to solve our problem. If the will is there, God will help us to find a way forward.
Thank you. Thank you. And Rich, Rosie, I don't know whether you want to make any response to that question before we move on.
I think my response would probably be that actually we need to work hard to. We've heard a little bit from Dr. Zahid and from myself and Rosie, and we'll hear from others as the session goes on, that actually faith has an awful lot to say about these issues, but faith communities haven't often said that in the past. And so there's still a lot of work to do to sort of convince people that our faith does have something to say into these issues. So I think it's really important to have sessions like these, but for individual churches and mosques and gurdwaras and everywhere else to actually speak about these issues locally and on a sort of wider scale, so that people can make those connections between their faith and the environment and the care for the environment. Okay,
thanks, Rich. All right, I'm going to make this the final question for this section, and this is from Petula. What message would you give to our world leaders as we head towards the G7 summit in June and the COP26 UN talks on climate change in November? What message would you give to our world leaders as we head towards the G7 summit in June and the COP26 UN talks on climate change in November? Rosie, I'm going to do ladies first on this occasion, and then I'll come to Dr. Zahid and then Rich. Just a brief reflection on that, please.
I would just say very simply, listen to the young people in your countries and your communities, because they are so passionate, they are so prophetic in what they're saying about how we should respond to climate change. They have the imagination and they have the courage. I think we need some of that youthful energy in those discussions at the COP26, and I really hope that they do listen.
Thanks, Rosie. Dr. Parvez?
There are many things we can say and we would like to say to people who have the power to shape things. But just one thing, if it's I have to prioritize, then they should become future oriented, future thinking, because the decisions they make now will impact us in the future, and not to limit their thinking from election to elections, but to think about the overall well-being of the world and not just their own positions.
Right, thank you. And Rich?
I think I would say that this is an issue that actually unites people across all the usual dividing lines of politics and religion and everything else, and different societies and communities. Actually, this is an incredibly uniting issue, and people from all walks of life care about this, and particularly, as Rosie said, young people. So this shouldn't be a hard thing to get support for.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. And interesting that you referenced young people there a couple of times. I was watching the program with Greta Thunberg last night on television, and it is really interesting how young people are mobilizing around this issue, and perhaps showing us the way as adults in our communities, and perhaps faith leaders around this future focus that Dr. Zahid referenced. So thank you all for those contributions. I'm hoping that we will have time again before the end of this session to revisit some more questions. I know that David Primrose also had a question about ethical purchasing that we will get back to before the end of this session. We're just going to take, as they say in the trade, a quick commercial break, a short video that is going to lead us into thinking about issues around warm heating in our homes. And this is something that we will be looking at a little bit. Oh, that's the wrong one. Let me make sure that I get the right video up first. And that will lead us into one of our speakers that's going to be sharing with us a little bit later on, Simon Ross from Marsh's Energy Agency, and just a short video that will help us to reflect on not just the wider global issues around climate change, but also just thinking about what this means in terms of warmer homes for individuals who are struggling in our communities today. Apologies, we'll have to show that later.
No problem. Technology always lets us down. Anyway, so our next speaker has previously worked for Near Neighbours, and is rather special actually because he's spoken at all 4 of our series of Faith and Finances events. He's a travelling preacher, does some amazing amount of interfaith work in Leicester and beyond. The one and only Brother Khatri Singh, today representing Vision 1469. So Brother Khatri, over to you.
Thank you ever so much, Shaz. That is, as always, it's wonderful to join this community online and be a part of the discussion. And I think over the time we've talked about some really important topics that are, I think, very central to the future direction of society. And I think the environmental sustainability is one in which, well, no oxygen, no trees. Well, there's not much we're going to do here. And I think it's one of those great challenges that we have, which almost is like the elephant in the room. No one's really spending the political capital and energy that we really need to tackle this as a topic. But environmentalism is a big part of who I am. I served on the board of the Black Environment Network, and that was looking at how do we encourage and engage diverse communities in the environmental sector, but also not just about saving the environment, about enjoying and appreciating and having an experience within nature. I've been involved with supporting the work of EcoSeek. Again, faith responses to this question around environmental sustainabilities, as well as doing projects with young people around, air miles, how much are we really wasting and how can we improve what we are doing so that we take our responsibility on this earth seriously. But I think also linking to the grand narratives of political change, I still remember going to Copenhagen for the COP15 climate change summit. And some of the things that have been talked about over the years, it's always been a challenge to see those translated into action, particularly when governments and nations have quite often watered down the desires of many people around the world to see real enactive change taking place. But from a Sikh perspective, I think I'll probably begin with a reflection from Gurbani. It's something that Sikhs will probably read every day. It's Pavan Guru Pani Pita Mata Dhart Mahat Dev Sara Doi Dai Daya Khele Sagal Jagd Changiyan Buriyan Vache Dharm Hadur Karmi Apo Apni Ke Nede Ke Dur Jinni Naam Te Aya Gaye Masakat Khal Nanak Te Mukh Ujle Keti Shutti Nal. And any Sikh who's probably heard me recite that's probably reciting that with me, with their microphones muted. But in this, Guruji says, air is the Guru, water is the father, and earth is the great mother of all. Day and night are like the two nurses in whose lap all of the world is at play. Good deeds and bad deeds, the record is read out in the presence of the Lord of Dharma. According to our own actions, some are drawn closer and some are driven further away. O Nanak, their faces are radiant in the court of the Lord, and they only can bless the world around them with their presence and bliss, who depart this world in union with God and his creation. And for me, we talk about environmental sustainability. This is Guru giving a direct responsibility for us to depart this world, having lived in union with God and God's creation. And that points so clearly to our responsibility to nature, to the environment in which we live. And I often look back into Sikh history and I look at the lives of the Gurus and the examples that they led and the examples that they showed us by which we could follow their examples. And I begin with this thought of having love for nature. And for me, this is epitomized by Guru Har Rai Sahib, who was the seventh Guru. Now, Guru Har Rai Sahib is a beautiful Sakhi from his youth, where one day in his excitement to run towards his grandfather, who he loved so much, just as many of us would have run to our grandparents or our parents when they came to see us. As he ran, the hem of his jawla, the hem of his cloth, brushed against a flower, and it tore off some of the petals, and it damaged that flower. And seeing this, Guru Har Rai Sahib's grandfather said to him, son, you should be really careful about where you tread, because that is life there. That is connected to God. We should be very careful and conscious about our behavior and how we interact in this world. And from that day on, it said that whenever Guru Sahib would walk, they were always very careful where they stepped. They would make sure that they looked where they moved so that even a flower was not hurt by their actions. And for me, there is a sense of deep love and respect for nature that we find within that example. That each one of us, there's so many wonderful quotes about treading carefully. I think we as humans, we are sometimes so unconscious in our choices and the steps that we make. We may destroy nature without even considering the damage that we're doing to the world around us. And for me, it's rooted in that sense of God is present in all of these things. Within the Sikh tradition, we say that Waheguru, the Almighty, is present within all existence and all creation. And therefore, our responsibility is to God as present in all of these things. And so when we walk, when we are out and about, we have that personal responsibility to walk with care, to act with care. And Guru Har Rai Sahib went on to continue the theme of environmental sustainability, of love and care for nature, by setting up beautiful gardens, planting many fruit trees. So not just trees that give us oxygen, but trees that would give people who are hungry food. This would be a gift from nature. And personally, it's one of my favorite times of the year. So late August, early September, when the fig trees in our garden ripen, and you can just go into the garden and reach up and just pluck a fig from a tree and eat it fresh. There's something so connected about that experience. There's something so humbling about that experience. And so Guru Sahib planted fruit trees, medicinal plants, and even created animal sanctuaries. These were ways in which Guru demonstrated our love and respect and responsibility towards nature. And for me, I take a sense of guidance from that this is something that I need to be conscious of in my everyday actions. And even Guru Nanak Sahib, because when we talk about environmental sustainability, quite often we forget that as technology increases, as things are mass produced, quite often those things which were ingrained in small scale farming are lost, that sense of connection with nature. And quite often in the mass production of things, everything is about efficiency. And Guru Nanak Sahib, when he settled in Kartarpur, was very much living with that sustainable mindset, cultivating farms, creating food, sharing, and living in harmony with nature. And it's difficult for us, living in 21st century Great Britain with the technology, with cars, with, work that may be hundreds of miles away. It's very difficult sometimes for us to live that connected lifestyle because so much of our life is artificial. So much of which is rooted in a way that is disconnected from nature, or even is sometimes harmful to nature. And I think this is something that's often quite internally conflicting, I would say.
Start wrapping up for us, please, Brother Kathar.
Okay. And so I would say when it comes to this responsibility that we have, there are two sides. One is that personal transformation that we have through the choices that we make. But more than that, it's about enacting great political change, because who would have thought with COVID, changes that have been put in place right now could take place. If we have the political will and desire to make that change, it's doable. And so focusing on government policies, looking at the technologies that we have, how can we enact real change that is systemic, that ensures that the average person is a part of that movement. And I think this is where we all have that personal responsibility, that personal choice that we have to transform our decisions in a way that are environmentally sustainable and conscious. And I'm going to finish with, again, Gurbani, because in our ardas, in a supplicatory prayer, we say the words, Nanak Naam, Jardi Kala, Tere Pane, Sarbat Da Pala. And in this Guru Nanak Sahib, he says, the reflection is, when we remember God's name, we are inspired and eternally positive. Tere Pane, by your grace, Sarbat Da Pala, may everyone prosper. And when I say everyone prosper, I think Guruji was not just talking about people. It was plants, animals, and environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Khatri. Once again, very eloquently spoken as always. Thank you for those reflections, and most certainly a lot of food for thought there. And by the way, I have in many occasions spoken to a brother who's involved in EcoSeek, and they're doing some great work in Sandwell. So important, I think, to take that bottom-up approach to have the most impact in this topic. And I love the reflection from a Sikh perspective about loving nature and how we interact with the world. So once again, lots of a big thank you to you for your contribution today. Now, our final speaker is a recent graduate and a climate change activist. She works in policy in her professional role and is passionate about combining climate policies and grassroots action. Jasmine Khatri, a volunteer at Hindu Climate Action. So over to you, Jasmine.
First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak at this event. It's been really good hearing what all the other speakers have had to say from different faiths. So I'll just give the Hindu perspective, aware of time, so I'll try and keep it relatively brief. So the Hindu faith contains a diverse range of traditions, and there are a great many teachings on climate change and our roles in kind of looking after the planet. But I thought there were two concepts that could illustrate sort of the main beliefs that we have. So the first one being that Hindus believe in an ancient concept called Rita, meaning cosmic order, so kind of how the world works. And within this order, we are all interconnected and dependent on one another for our welfare. And this is inclusive of the environment and everything in it as well. So this also includes all living beings. So our idea of family must extend to the whole world, including the natural world. And this is also the concept of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which is the world as one family and how we consider all as one. So we consider the environment and nature as the Lord and a form of the divine. So the second broad concept is that many Hindus believe that the earth is a manifestation of the mother goddess who provides us with food, shelter, and everything else we could possibly need. So our attitude to the environment should be one of respect and gratitude for the fact that we have everything that we need here. And as devotees, we see God everywhere in nature and the whole world as our temple. So our kindness and compassion extends to the environment and not just ourselves. So it's building on that concept of interconnectedness and sort of not just the division between us as humans and the earth, but that we are part of the environment, we are nature, and the world is part of our family. So across all of our scriptures, they hold reference to the Mother Earth, and it is summed up very well when we call the earth the mother, so the one who continues to give selflessly. And our roles sort of in short are ones of taking care of nature by realizing that we are one and we are part of nature. So being part of family and being connected. So kind of just building on that, like I know people have made like a lot of really good points in this event around taking care of nature and the climate change issues that we are facing. And I think looking at the Hindu faith, this kind of extends to, increasing resilience, be that financial resilience, be that energy resilience through things like, looking at renewable energy. So for example, fossil fuels, they are, a big problem because they deplete the earth of like natural resources, and they show that we are not, we are not taking care of the earth as we should be. And so like things, for example, such as green utility providers, they help this transition to a society and a system where we are, taking care of the earth. We are showing that we're not here to deplete resources. And it also sort of helps to act as like a long-term payoff and a more gradual and smooth transition to sort of show that interconnectedness and show that we are part of a family and taking care of the earth as we should be. Yeah, that is sort of like the Hindu sort of thoughts on that topic, sort of stressing that importance around family and connection and really taking care of the earth as we would take care of our own.
Thank you, Jasmine, for that contribution, and it was great to hear about your tradition in the Hindu faith. So thank you very much for that. So from drawing from what everybody the speakers have spoken about, there's a lot of commonality when listening to all of them. And one message I heard from all of you was that the importance of working in unity, which is always great to hear. So thank you very much for that. Now we are going to open the platform for questions and answers once again for our speakers. So please do keep those questions coming in. If you want to say the question yourself verbally, please do raise your blue virtual hand, and you can do that by going to the bottom of the screen, clicking on participants, and if you scroll right down, it'll give you the option to show your blue hand. Oh, and by the way, Jasmine, yeah, thank you for reminding me, Jasmine. Jasmine has to leave because she has other work commitments. However, she has said if anybody has a question, please leave it with us and we'll email it to her and email you back with the answer. So please do leave any questions for her on the chat. Cassius, I'll hand it over to you if there's any questions on the chat.
Yeah, real shame that that Jasmine had to leave at that point, because I wanted to ask her perspective as a young person in relation to this. But I'm gonna ask Brother Khatri to share from his perspective, because I know that he wears many hats, one of which is being a teacher and inspiring young people, just to perhaps share from your own perspective, Brother Khatri, about the importance of us engaging in this issue alongside our young people, and what you are seeing in our communities currently.
Thank you, Brother Cassius. It's one of those areas where I think young people have such energy and passion and drive towards transformation and change. I think as people get older, maybe we become more cynical, maybe we become less aspirational. I think youth has such energy and drive and such a passion for change. And I think it's so important for us to harness that to building transformation. But equally, I think there is wisdom and experience that we have, having seen environmental issues and challenges and movements over the years, in guiding those young people to say, we've tried these things before, these are the lessons that we've learned, these are the mistakes that we made, or these are the things that we could improve on. And I would say that there was always, whenever I've done work with young people on environmental sustainability, there is a lot of passion there. There is a lot of drive to want to contribute. Quite often it's about channeling that energy and saying, here's a great way in which you can engage, or here's a way you can participate. And sometimes it's even a very small thing. So with young primary school children, it's very simple things. It's about ingraining that mindset of being responsible, about minimizing waste, about not using too many plastics. And I think that is at the heart of education for young people. But as we get older, we recognize, I remember over the last 10 years, some of the ideas that have been coming forward about building change, the failure has been on us. People who have been in positions of responsibility and going up to those in political office, we've not held them to account. We've not pushed as much as we should have to say to them, what's happening right now is not good enough. And I think, Greta Thunberg is a powerful example of the inspiration of youth. I think it's something that we can all connect with. And I think each one of us recognizes that child within ourselves that once dreamed great dreams. And even still now, I think we still dream great dreams, but we all recognize the barriers and challenges that face us. But I think actually each one of us has that responsibility to nurture the seeds that are planted in young people right now and give them the strength and encouragement and blessings to go forth and do what they do best.
Brilliant, thank you. Young people have always been close to my heart in terms of my own faith upbringing or being brought up in the Christian faith, and the recognition that if we are not connecting with our young people that on these issues that they are clearly passionate about, then we are also losing out in terms of bringing that energy in our faith. So really appreciate your reflection on that. I just want to go back to a question that David Primrose posted earlier, and then we'll come back to some of the other comments in the chat. David writes, and I'm going to invite the other speakers, if they're still here, to add to this or to respond to this as well, if they're able. As one place to start, are ethical purchasing policies ready, available for local faith communities? As one place to start, are ethical purchasing policies ready, available for local faith communities? So if any of the speakers wants to just indicate, and then we can take you off mute to respond to that. Everybody's avoiding my eyes at this stage, and that's never a good sign on screen. David, I wonder if you're there and whether you want to elaborate a bit more on the question.
Very happy to. Yes, Cassius, fantastic event, just so encouraging. I'm now aligned with Lichfield Cathedral, and on Friday we're talking about an ethical purchasing policy, and I know it's such a complex issue. To have somewhere to begin with means at least other people around the table will be saying, oh, this is possible. Rosie's already shared one example from a church in Lewis, which is great, and I'll definitely look through that. But it's almost like saying, can we have something to work with rather than overwhelm people with what might seem the complexity and magnitude of the task?
Okay, thanks, David. Rosie, Rich, does anybody want to add to that, or is that? Yeah, okay. I think we're happy to move on. So I hope that that's answered your question. I've got a raised hand that I can see with, I think it's Jeremy Lowe.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy, do you want to just unmute yourself so that you can share your question?
Hello, Cassius. Yeah, I did put a comment in the chat, and I see Rosie's referred to it. And the reason I put my hand up is because David has just sort of mentioned that he's going to use that document he's seen to help inform potentially purchasing policies of Lichfield Cathedral. I looked at it, and the first two comments are inaccurate, and I would say if I was working for Red Tractor, I may even be taking legal action, because and one of the biggest concerns I have working closely with the farming community is how distressed they become when they see misinformation about what they're doing, and it almost to the extent of, well, why do we bother? And we've seen lots of examples. The meat, A Threat to Our Planet, that had to be taken down by the BBC. Farmers think, well, I do not recognise the sort of farming practice that they're talking about, because it's not the standard practice that happens in the UK. And we have to be very, very careful with this. It is a very complex issue, and there is a danger of oversimplifying it. And we are in a sort of a Twitter generation or what have you, where short sound bites without looking at the complexity. Red Tractor, there's just been massive consultations about their standards. And the standards, they are a basic standard, but they certainly don't go below what is legally required. And they do go beyond, but they also look at standards of production throughout the whole supply chain. So not just the farm, but they look at the feed coming into that farm, and they look at the sort of processing sector going out. So, and again, with the Lion brand for eggs, to say that they don't have standards of production, again, they've just had a consultation, and the document is something like that farmers have to have to understand. It's something like 180 pages long.
Can you start wrapping up, Jeremy, please?
Yeah. So all I want to say is we should not oversimplify this, and we should be very careful about documents that we promote as a church, because some people will be hurt by them.
That's great. Right. Before we get opinions from our speakers, I'm just going to bring Rachel Arnold in for her contribution.
First of all, mine was another question, not about answering this one. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
I went to 2 of the hustings for the mayoral candidates on climate change, and apparently the West Midlands Pension Fund wants to invest 500 million on fossil fuels. All the political parties were saying, Tandy Street, you can't fight climate change and do that. And they're all saying, no, divest. And you say, no, the pensioners need to get their assets. Does anyone know what's being done about this?
That's great, a great question. Who can I bring in for that? Who would like to answer that from our speakers? And then we'll come back to Jeremy's concern that he's raised. I'm going to start picking. I was a teacher once, you know. Okay, I'm going to ask Brother Khatri. Would you like to come in on that?
Sure. I think this is one of the great challenges of the entire discussion around environmental sustainability, about being, environmentally conscious, because we live in an economic system that pits, one priority over the other, it becomes a minefield. It becomes very difficult for people to make choices, recognizing that some of the ethical choices may have financial implications on people, and that it's always a very difficult decision to make, because who am I to say, make this investment where it might affect someone's pension or someone's financial future and stability and their safety. Someone who's contributed their whole life towards a pension pot, and those investment systems work that way. And I think this again points to a systemic problem where actually should our economics be in a different direction to our relationship with nature. And maybe that, as one of the people I met on the climate change summit in Copenhagen, he was very much about system reset, which was very radical. And many people would, shudder at that thought. But I think this is where some of these questions go towards. It's asking very difficult questions about what do we put as a priority. And I think I don't think there are ever any easy answers. I think there are moral answers that we choose, and I think that's something that personally we can make that choice, or we can push forwards. But unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, we can't, make other people join us on that journey. So I think it's something about educating people towards why they should put this as a priority, rather than saying this way or that way.
Right, and Reverend Rich, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I can't comment on the sort of specifics of that particular pension fund, but I know the Church of England's done a lot of work with a lot of companies on how pension funds are invested. But the other thing which I think is really important and links a little bit with what Brother Khatri was saying there, was a point that Dr. Zahid made earlier about being future oriented and not just looking at the sort of short term. And I know the West Midlands, as a sort of, is it unitary authority, whatever the phrase is, the term is aiming for net zero by, I think it's 2042. And that seems quite at odds with the idea of then investing the pension funds into fossil fuels. Actually, we need to challenge politicians, challenge our leaders to take those responsibilities seriously. And if we're going to aim for net zero, then we need to aim for net zero. And I think that thing about being future oriented, not just short term, what will we get back? Because also the trends are that fossil fuels are going to be less valued, and they're going to bring in less returns. So actually investing in things that are long-term sustainable is a better thing for pension funds as well. So yeah, that's great.
Does anybody else want to give any further contributions? Dr. Zahid, do you have? No? Okay, that's great. And I know Jeremy raised a concern as well. Rosie, can I politely ask that you write that an answer, because I'm assuming this answer is going to be very long and detailed. Could you please answer that directly to Jeremy on chat? Would that, because it'll be a bit short for time at the moment. It's already 12:46, and I'm just thinking that if you don't mind, that'd be great. Cassius, I'll hand that back over to you if there's any more questions on chat.
No, some really good points, and Simon Ross, who's going to be our next speaker, has also posted a link in the chat in relation to churches and investments in fossil fuels. So perhaps, Simon, when you come on to speak, it would be good if you could just give us some background to that when you speak. And this is fantastically complex. I remember having a conversation with Rosie's predecessor at Ethical Churches, and just talking around the challenges around trying to invest and even think about where you put money with banks, and how you ask questions about where that money is going to be invested in the future. It is very complex, but there are organizations out there who can help, and I'd certainly point to Ethical Money Churches as one of those organizations or resources for people to look at. But also just to appreciate, reflecting on Jeremy's comment, that the reality is that none of us make these decisions in a vacuum. They will affect people in one way or another. But I do like the reflection from Dr. Zahid. Perhaps in wrapping this up, if we can think about those, you know, that future focus, perhaps if we can all have that long-term future focus, it will help us in some of this decision making. So yeah, Shaz has indicated that if the speakers are able to respond to any of the other questions on chat, that would be great. And I know that Brother Khatri has responded to one, just translating the beautiful text that he started with in his talk. We are going to move on to our last speaker, Simon Ross. And to save Shaz coming back in, I will do this introduction. Simon is the director of March's Energy Agency, which is a Shropshire-based energy charity dedicated to supporting people to be warmer and more comfortable at home by lowering energy bills and using energy more efficiently and in generating their own energy. This is his witness in responding to our climate and ecological emergency. And it's a real pleasure to have Simon join us and share his own reflections. Hopefully I can get my screen sharing to work more effectively this time so that you can see his presentation. So hopefully you can see that slide. So Simon, over to you.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Well, Cassius and Shaz, many thanks for the opportunity to present to you briefly today. Just on that link that I shared from DSMOG, I just close it off very quickly. I really don't feel I can probably give much background or context to it. It's just to say I am aware that within the Church of England there have been conversations and there is a movement towards divesting from fossil fuels. That link was a quick search I had whilst we've been talking, and I hope there might be some interesting material in there. A quick scan from me suggested it could be some useful in terms of helping us understand some of the Church of England aspirations around that and actions as well. So really, the Warmer Homes West Midlands is a fuel poverty programme, as Cassius was saying, really just designed to help people who are struggling. The focus for this conversation is we've got funding to support the Black Country and Birmingham. There's a long history that sits behind it, which has enabled us to get to this point. And I've just got a little video at the end from one of the people that we've been able to help recently, just to try and bring some of the issues to life a little bit, really. But underpinning this particular project is something like 60,000 households in the Black Country struggling with a cold home, similar numbers in Birmingham, and these are pre-COVID figures. And we know that actually the incidence of people struggling in their homes has got a lot worse in the last year. If I could have the next slide, please. So part of our response to that is to be supporting residents in crisis. We take a view which is to listen to their needs. It's not a scripted service that we provide, but we are seeking to understand their concerns and then to support them as best we can with a variety of avenues or approaches around cold homes, energy bills, broken boilers, etc., to try and steer them into the right path. So we do take an approach which concentrates on both the person, the individual caller who's struggling, and also on the property as well. So we consider the physical aspects of their home as well, and we look to provide support for all people who come forward to us. If I could have the next slide, please. So to give you a bit more of a feel for that, we can provide support around benefits checks. We don't do those, but we've got a partner organisation that does them. We're providing support directly around tariff advice. So that could be somebody just checking they're on a tariff and helping them to switch and save a bit of money that way. And very often we're finding that householders are saving, in the order of £200 by switching to a new provider. We are helping with support with billing and energy debt issues. Again, this is a really complicated space, but actually we're getting quite good at setting up three-way phone conversations between ourselves, the individual household around their energy company. We're finding often it can take a long time to get through to a sensible conclusion, but my colleagues are routinely shifting debt in the order of £500, £600, £700, £800, over £1,000 in some cases. So there is a lot of practical support that we can provide in relation to that. We are signing people up for the Warmer Homes discount, and also we have some crisis funding under the COVID emergency response for some prepayment meter vouchers, which is putting £49 straight onto people's prepayment meters for both gas and electric, and we're offering up to 3 of those vouchers per household. So that's available now today for anybody in the Black Country and Birmingham as well. We also provide advice on energy saving tips around heating controls, around the optimum use of storage heaters. And also we are talking about various access for various capital funding measures. So that can include things like cavity wall and loft insulation, as well as first-time central heating and boiler repairs and replacements, where opportunities allow. We can also offer a home visit program, and again, that's really hit the buffers around COVID, but the aspiration is to get back to offering a home visit program whereby we can provide all this advice and support, not just remotely, but also in people's homes as well. So in terms of for all, it is open for council tenants, for housing association tenants, for private tenants, for landlords, for families of all types, and from everybody from every background, provided they're within Birmingham and the Black Country, and they live in a home and they have energy bills. So it's really a very broad service that we're providing. And the last slide, please, Cassius, as well. So that's how to get hold of us. So the project is called Warmer Homes West Midlands. There's an email address there and a free phone number. And if you press 1, that'll get you through to Birmingham. And if you press 2, that'll get you through to the Black Country. Right. That's it. Thank you for listening, and hope we can help more people in the future.
Thanks, Simon. Really appreciate it. And yeah, great to hear about the global issues that we may be able to impact. Great to hear about the theological discussions from our different faith perspectives, and just bringing us perhaps back to grounding in recognizing that there are many across our region who are struggling to heat their own homes today. And if we can support in helping them to think about how they may be able to sign up to green energy providers and connect with some of the wider issues around climate change and climate justice, I think that would be a great help to us all. It's been great to be able to share with you on this event. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation and discussion that we have engaged in. Please do keep in touch with us at Transforming Communities Together. .org.uk. Please do sign up via our website and stay in touch with us. But I really just wanted to finish by thanking all of our speakers for today. Rich Clarkson, Rosie Wenner, thank you. Dr. Zahid Parvez, Brother Khatri, who we know well from these discussions, Jasmine, who has sadly had to leave us, and of course Simon Ross, who we just heard from. We will be following up these discussions. We plan to meet again on the 20th of July, if you'd like to pencil the date in your diary. Faith, finance and homelessness. Faith, finance and homelessness on the 20th of July. But thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope that we will be able to meet again in the future. God bless you.